Yes, he was never, never in favor of Fidel. And when Fidel came on the scene, he knew it was a disaster. And he told Julio Lobo, it's a disaster.
Luis, I do not know how you're not dead, and I also don't know how you do not have a movie about you yet, because your life is f***ing insane.
Well, I'm alive. And the movie's on its way.
It is on its way.
I'm working on a movie now. We've got some very interested people, and it's very, very long.
Well, you and I, that's great to hear, because you and I had an awesome dinner last night just talking about your life on a high level. I've also started to read the book you did with Jesse Fink. I'm about 100 pages in. I was reading some yesterday afternoon. Phenomenal. Highly recommend. It's called Pure Narco, and it's long because you've had a long 25-year run in the past.
25 years.
With basically every cartel known to man.
Except the Asian ones. Although I think once we hooked up with an Asian guy in New York, he was going to give us hair and we were going to give him coke. We ended up partying for like 5 days at the plaza. And that deal never went through.
Okay.
But yeah, Colombia cartels and Mexican cartels across the board.
So we're going to get into all of it today, and we'll take as long as we got to do. Don't care if it's 2 podcasts or 1. We'll get it figured out. But essentially, you were, first of all, your backstory's nuts, how you ended up in this, but you were the logistics guy. I kind of look at you, seeing as you never carried a gun, never ordered anyone killed, and you were the middleman basically getting it between countries on behalf of these cartels. I kind of look at you as like the nonviolent Kaiser Soze of the cartel world, because you roll up. You look like Francis Ford Coppola. You're like this fun, affable guy. You're the last person I'd look at and be like, yeah, that motherfucker's in the cartel.
Well, that's the idea. And I always had that very clear in my mind. I mean, there's one thing I knew, and that was, it's not healthy to be hot and be in that business. So I got in the business. I was fortunate to get into it at a high level, and I liked it. And I always tried to keep myself from getting involved in things that I knew didn't come natural to me. What came natural was business and logistics. The killing part and the violence, that happened. I won't say it didn't, because, you work for the Medellin cartel, Northern Valley cartel, the Mexican cartels, like that happens. I mean, but let's say it's not my department. Okay, but these are organizations that have a lot of different people that do a lot of different things. But I always knew that the key and what made me keep going was I stayed myself. I remained as who I was, and I didn't try to play a part that I didn't feel right. I always felt right doing what I did, which was logistics. And I excelled at it. First, through distribution networks in the USA. I got very hot in the USA, and I left to Colombia, and then I opened up what you would call export offices, where you buy planes and you buy boats, and then you offer your services, and you've got connections in the Bahamas, you've got connections in Mexico, in Belize, in Guatemala, later on in Europe, and you put these into play. It's just like business today. You've got connections that buy aluminum, so you work with them, and you always make.
You're doing some of that now.
Yes, I do a lot
the
of
aluminum
metals,
business.
Aluminum, copper, manganese, different minerals, and I don't know what to tell you. I think that's probably more dangerous and worse than the cocaine is.
Really?
I mean, what we're
doing...
The
aluminum business?
Not the aluminum, but in general, to feed this craziness that all Americans have and the whole world has on electric cars, we're making big holes in the world. Africa, it's all mined out. There's a lot of news about this. Basically the Chinese own Africa.
Yeah, the cobalt mining and all that shit.
And the copper and the cobalt and the lithium in Bolivia.
Right.
So it's all bad, but you know, um, you know, I never thought that. I never felt out of place in my business. I never thought I was doing anything bad. I knew it was illegal.
When you were in the business?
Yeah, of course. I mean, illegal, yes. But I think it was morally wrong, no. Now, there's a lot of people don't like that, but I have to be truthful. You know, if I really was against it, if I thought it was morally wrong, I wouldn't be doing it. And I got into it and I fell into a groove, let's say, that lasted 25 years.
Well,
That's the thing.
I don't want to touch that yet because I think one of the most fascinating things about you is your psychology and just breaking down how you view what your worldview is, how you view your role and what your role has been in it. So I think that's going to come up throughout the conversation. So I'll put a pin in that. But can we start at the very beginning? You were born into a hurricane, essentially. You were born in Cuba, I guess, what, 4 or 5 years before Castro took over?
Yes.
Do you remember Cuba at all?
No. No, I was too young. You know, I came from a well-to-do family. My father was in the sugar business in a very big way. They had interests also in sugar trading in New York. So from early years of 1940s, 1950s, my dad was in New York and Wall Street. So we were an affluent family in Cuba. And when we got to Miami, we got to Key Biscayne, my dad had monies that he had brought over from Cuba.
How did he get money out of Cuba? I never,
Well-
like Alessi, your family's from Cuba, right? And your grandfather got f***ed, right?
Yeah, we got royally and lost everything and had to start over. So yours is one of the cases where it's very few people have that success.
Yeah. How did
Well,
that happen?
My dad worked with Julio Lobo, and the company was called Galvan Lobo. It was the largest sugar trading company in the world.
Who was Julio?
Julio Lobo was the richest South American at that time. He was the richest man in South America. He owned more sugar mills than anybody else. The United States had a sugar deal with Cuba that they paid Cuba the same monies they paid the U.S. farmers. Cuba was in a privileged position as far as sugar was. So working in Wall Street and having access to, you know, the world and in the position he was in, he was able to have offshore accounts and, you know, his earnings, he didn't keep them in Cuba. He kept them overseas.
Smart.
Yes, he was never in favor of Fidel. And when Fidel came on the scene, he knew it was a disaster. And he told Julio Lobo, it's a disaster. Julio thought that they could manage Fidel, that Fidel was a guy that they could manage, that he was a young kid and he was manageable. And my dad always told him, no, you're wrong. Julio used to say, we're going to tweak him like a puppet. It didn't turn out like that. And
Did your dad ever talk with you about Fidel?
Nope. Ever since when he left Cuba, he never touched that subject again.
Never.
He's not the kind of guy that, no, can Cuba? No. My dad was a very quiet person. Rarely did he say anything. And when he said something, it meant something. He was an amazing businessman, very well respected, and worked at the highest levels. Even when we got to Miami, he opened up shipping companies. You know, the first sugar mill in Florida, you know, my dad created that with partners from New York. He worked with Milbank, Tweed, Hadley, and McCloy.
The law firm.
Yeah, the Rockefeller law firm, Chase Manhattan Bank law firm. They put together a group and with the local Glades County sugar farmers, they put together the first sugar refinery.
And you were saying at dinner last night your dad specifically liked working with Americans. He didn't like working with Latin Americans?
Yes. Nothing against Latin Americans, but at that time he was very involved with Americans and the sugar market. He had the offices in Wall Street. And he just felt that they ran a cleaner show, let's say. You know, America was more organized, and he was used to organized business, not reckless. And South American, you know, not to say anything bad, but he really respected the American way of doing business.
Got it. Now, when you were growing up, was he trying to get you into that business at all? Did you work with him? Was he a big influence in your life, or was his business very separate from family?
His business was very separate. And since his business was 2 hours away from Miami, he spent a lot of time in Clewiston, Florida. He would leave, every week he was out, you know, 3 or 4 days of the week he was away from home. And he was a workaholic. And I mean, he created this from nothing. The first sugar mill, and then the shipping business. He was always very involved in business. He was a workaholic, and he was very smart at what he did. He was not a salesman. He was an administrator, and he had a sharp numbers mind. So did he always tell me? No, he was very quiet. He wasn't much of a talkative person. He never told me, no, get into the. What he always told me was study, study, study. Get a degree, become a professional. And unfortunately, that was not me. That's the truth. I mean, I went to high school. I went to a Jesuit high school. I had classmates of mine that knew they were going to be engineers, knew they were going to be doctors, knew they're going to be accountants. Not me. I was in high school. I didn't know what the hell I was going to be. I just wanted to make money. I knew I liked money. But how? I didn't know. I didn't know.
Were you a troublemaker? Or?
Somewhat. Yes. I wasn't the most, you know, disciplined student. And, you know, I was always up to some mischief. But in a good way, not a bad way. But I was, you know, I got along with B's and C's in school because, you know, I'm not dumb, and I would listen. And if I had to cram the last day, I would. But I could have, if I would have studied, I would have had A's and B's. But I wasn't into school.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.